Welcome to Calderdale event that marks Holocaust Memorial Day 2022, organised by Calderdale Interfaith in partnership with Calderdale College. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Canon Hilary Barber. I'm the Vicar of Halifax Minster. I'm also the Vice Chair of Calderdale Interfaith, and I have a new hat, which is the co-chair of Interfaith Network across the United Kingdom. So I'm delighted to welcome all of you this evening. Events during this week help us to remind us of the millions of people who were murdered under Nazi persecution and those genocides that followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Between 1941 and 1945, 6 million Jewish men, women and children were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Their attempt to murder all the Jews in Europe shook the foundations of civilization. The Nazis targeted anyone they believed threatened their ideal of a pure Aryan race, including Roma and Sinti people, disabled people, gay people, political opponents and others. From 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, imposed an extremist program to reconstruct Cambodia. Millions of people died through starvation, disease and exhaustion, and thousands were executed. In a violent outpouring in 1994, approximately 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered in just 100 days in the genocide in Rwanda. In July 1995, against the backdrop of an ongoing civil war, Bosnian Serb forces led by Ratko Mladic murdered around 8,000 Muslim men and boys in the town of Srebrenica. In 2003, a civil war began in the region of Darfur. Arab militia known as the Janjaweed attacked Black African people, destroying entire villages, murdering civilians and displacing many more. This terrible loss of human life is what brings us together today in hope, creating a better future for our own children and future generations. I'm hugely grateful to Paul Waterworth and Sale Suleiman for pulling this event together for us today on behalf of Calderdale Interfaith and Calderdale College. I will chair the event and will introduce each of our speakers in turn. There will hopefully be time for a few questions to Holocaust survivor Leisel Carter after she's spoken. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. I'm now delighted to welcome Hannah Randall from the Holocaust Exhibition and Learning Centre and the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association based at Huddersfield University. Welcome, and over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Hilary. First of all, hello everyone, and thank you to Paul and Sale for organising this event and letting us be involved. So I'm Hannah and I'm the producer of Learning and Events at the Holocaust Exhibition and Learning Centre, as Hilary said, and we are based at the University of Huddersfield. So the Exhibition and Learning Centre are run by a charity called the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association, and that charity was set up in the early 90s to provide support between groups of survivors. Steadily that has grown into what we are today, which is an exhibition, a learning centre, and we still offer that community support and friendship to our survivor membership, of whom Leisel is one, and I'm glad to see Leisel joining us today. At the exhibition, we have a learning programme for primary, secondary, college, adult groups. We recently had an interfaith group that in so we can cater our learning program for anyone. We also do events. We have our first in-person event in 2 years tomorrow evening. Thank you, COVID. But we do have an online event series, 2 online event series even. We have an academic keynote series, which brings the most modern research in the field to you in your own home. And then we have a change in perspective series, which is a series that I run myself using modern examples of discrimination, prejudice and hate crime to the audiences to show the relevance of Holocaust education on today's society. If you're interested in attending any of those, all of our links are on our website. And as well as that, we have artistic responses, we have travelling exhibitions, we're a centre of academic research and much, much more. If you want to keep up to date with our work, 1, come and visit us, we are open again. 2, attend any of our events, whether that's in person or online, and 3, follow us on social media. We are on every platform, Facebook, Twitter, even TikTok. So yeah, thank you, and I'll hand back to Hilary.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you very much, Hannah, for all the work that you do and for your help with this evening's event. The chair of Calderdale Interfaith is always the mayor of Calderdale, and the faith communities always extend a very warm welcome to the sitting mayor to chair during their year in office the Interfaith Council. And I'm delighted now to welcome Cllr Chris Pillai as the mayor of Calderdale and also as chair of Calderdale Interfaith to speak to us now about Holocaust Memorial Day and the work of Calderdale Interfaith and that of the council. Over to you, Cllr Pillai.
Good evening, Hilary. Thank you for the introduction, and good evening to everyone who's present online. As already been introduced as the Mayor of Calderdale, Chris Pillai, and Chair of Calderdale Interfaith Group. Now, I've been asked to say a few words, and I'm saying a few words. I'll try and keep it as minimum as possible, but we'll see how we go. I'm pleased to be have been invited to support this year of Holocaust Memorial Day commemorations as Mayor of Calderdale and Chair of the Calderdale Interfaith. Holocaust Memorial Day commemorations have been supported by Calderdale Council, Calderdale Interfaith, and partners including Calderdale College for many years. It is important that we recognize genocides that have taken place and also the challenges we face as we hear, witness, and see new genocides taking place as I speak. It is important that we reflect on all the genocides that have taken place from these and pray that the world around us does not see or repeat of the history tells us what's taken place. Calderdale has a proud record of interfaith working through partnership working with Calderdale. I understand that Calderdale Interfaith has now been working tirelessly across the borough for 20 years. This is a testament to the colleagues that have supported the work and maintained relationship with people of faith and no faith. This has been crucial in helping maintain strong community relations, particularly at challenging times. One of Calderdale's greatest assets is the diversity that Halifax has. Todmorden and Allen are homes to sizable minority ethnic communities, and the Calder Valley is home to one of the largest lesbian and gay communities in the country. Such diversity is becoming increasingly important in developing the whole cultural, social, economic vibrancy of the borough. We want Calderdale to be a place where everyone feels they have a stake, a place where people feel safe and that they belong. a place where they are not subject to discrimination or harassment because of who they are and how they identify themselves, and a place where everyone has the opportunity to achieve, thrive, and take up opportunities that's available. In 2024, Calderdale Council will be celebrating the 50th birthday. We are working towards a vision for 2024, re-engage and energizing Calderdale as an enterprising, talented, resilient, and kind place to live, work, and visit. We continue to invest in our neighborhoods, in our voluntary community and faith sectors to build relationships, building the sustaining a kind and resilient borough. Increasing social mixing where people live, go to school, and work, and increasing people's sense of belonging. To summarize, we have had a very challenging 2 years with COVID-19. I'm grateful to the faith sector, people of faith and no faith, and communities that have come together to support individuals and families through a difficult period. Without this support, we would have found it difficult to get through to those that are mostly vulnerable in society. Thank you very much, Hilary. It's over to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pillai, and we wish you well in the rest of your year of office as Mayor. I'm delighted now to welcome our partners for this event, which is to introduce John Rees as the Principal of Calderdale College, and for him to share with us his understanding of HMD and the work of the college with its dedication to equality, diversity and inclusivity, and its work across the whole of Calderdale. John, we're delighted to have you here with us, and I pass the baton over to you.
Thank you, Hilary. That's much appreciated. If you just bear with me one moment. So yes, good evening, friends. As Hilary has just introduced me, John Rees, I'm the Principal and Chief Executive at Calderdale College. And once again, it's my pleasure to welcome you all on this call to the online event to mark Holocaust Memorial Day for 2022. As we've heard, the proceedings for today have been organised and planned for and are hosted by members of Calderdale Interfaith, the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Association, and obviously us here at Calderdale College. And once again, my sincere thanks to all of them for their commitment and support. And I'd particularly like to add and extend my thanks and appreciation to both Paul and Sale for their continued commitment to make sure that Holocaust Memorial Day continues to be an essential and ongoing part of the Calderdale calendar. And as a side note, I can just share that you know, I've had roles in a significant number of colleges in different parts of the country, and an event like this is not commonplace, and I think it's something that really marks Calderdale out as a particularly special place in terms of its community commitment and its willingness and you know, the importance it places on commemorating events such as this. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is that of one day. It's one day that we put aside to come together and to remember and learn about the Holocaust, as Hilary's described for us, to understand a little more about Nazi persecution and the genocides that have followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur, and in the hope that there may be one day in the future where there is no genocide. As we learn more about the past, we can empathize with others today, and hopefully we can act together to ensure and create a better future. At Calderdale College, we are, as Hilary says rightly, I think, proud of our commitment to both promote and celebrate fairness, respect, equality, diversity, inclusion and engagement in everything that we try to do here as an organisation. It's a significant part of the life and work of the college, and through our regular programme of events throughout the year. That includes promoting events and activities such as Black History Month, Armistice Day, LGBT History Month, mental health awareness, our regular Festival of Cultures, and other events, including HMD, which we commemorate today. And we allow our students and staff, more than allow, we encourage our students and staff to learn more, to celebrate, to be proud of their own identity and bring their authentic selves to the college. In terms of the work we do with students through our enhanced tutorial program, students are given the opportunity to discuss critical and serious issues, including those around race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and other things that make us all unique. We deliberately set the bar high and challenge and give students the opportunity to broaden their horizons, to learn from each other and learn about each other alongside their main, if you like, course of study. We're trying to support our students to become well-rounded, thoughtful, tolerant and aware young people. Through our ongoing work to ensure that all students and staff are given opportunities to develop and thrive, and by investing in facilities to make our ambition around excellence in skills training for students and employers an accessible opportunity for all, both now and in the future. As a college, we are so proud of the broad and diverse community of our students and our staff, and we continue to welcome everyone through our doors, regardless of their identity, their background, their age, physical or mental ability, their gender identity, their marital status, their pregnancy or maternity status, race, religion, belief, biological sex, or sexual orientation. It's a serious commitment that Calderdale College has, and it's one that we are serious about continuing to promote and to encourage and to develop. We allow our students and staff to take pride in their identity, and we engage others and encourage others to do the same. And I guess, why is identity important? And I suppose for me, that's because what happens in genocide is that a group in power begins to say that it's our identity that matters, that takes primacy, that's important. And if you're not that identity, then you begin to lose your rights. You cannot vote, you cannot stand for election to public office, you maybe cannot teach, you perhaps can't pursue career ambitions, you can't become a doctor, maybe you can't go to school, and then maybe when your human rights have been eroded and denied, maybe you get to the point where you cannot exist. Survivors of the Holocaust and of other genocides often talk about the one day when everything changed, sometimes for the worse and sometimes for the better. Ibi Nil, who has spoken with us at previous events, feels that from one day to the next, everything changed, and yet nothing had changed. She told us, one day Gretel, my school friend, greeted me with an embrace. The next day, she ran across the road and turned her head away so as not to acknowledge me. Franziska Schwarz-Mikus was sterilized by the Nazis because she was deaf, as part of their process of persecuting anyone who did not fit their ideal. In this case, because they believed that disabled people were imperfect and had no worth. On that day, the Nazis took control of Franziska's body and of her life choices. The Nazis wanted to prevent people who they deemed unfit from being able to procreate. It has been estimated that between 1933 and 1939, 360,000 people were subjected to forced sterilization because they had, or were believed to have, either physical or mental disabilities. For Fazia, there was a defining day. Following civil war in 2003, which left millions of people displaced and thousands murdered, Fazia was targeted by the Sudanese government for supporting victims of genocide. And so she says, one day I decided to leave my country. It was a hard decision, but there was no other way. I left my home, my friends, my people. I left all my belongings. There is a book on a table near my bed, open to page 49, waiting for me. Those who were targeted and persecuted, held out for the one day in the future when their suffering might be over, hoping that they would all see the day of liberation. And on Holocaust Memorial Day, we learn from genocide for a purpose, to build a better future. When we look ahead to the one day with no genocide, what do we need to do today to achieve this? We can use this theme to motivate us to speak out when we see injustice, when we see prejudice and identity-based violence or discrimination. On Holocaust Memorial Day 2022, this one day, we come together in our communities to learn from the Holocaust and genocides, and to plan and hope for a better future. Today is a day for everyone, and I hope everybody who's here, together with millions of others across the world at other events, will continue to join, to keep learning and to take care and action to create a safer future for all of our communities. I'm incredibly pleased and proud to be able to introduce and hand over to Leisel Carter, who has very kindly agreed to step in and to share her story after our promoted speaker, Rosal Schatzberger, unfortunately had an accident over the last weekend and is now recovering at home. We of course wish her well. Leisel was born in Germany and aged 4, travelled across Europe alone to Britain to escape the threat of war. She lost her father and many other family members at the hands of the Nazis. And we now have the privilege and the opportunity to hear from her. So welcome once again, and thank you for taking part in what I'm sure will be an extremely thought-provoking and highly valuable evening. Thank you, Hilary, or I'm not sure, potentially handing directly over to Lisa. Thanks.
Thank you, John, very much indeed. And over to you now, Leisel, please.
Yes. Now, yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the chance to come here and share my story to date. I say to date because my story continues to grow as I learn more about my history. My name is Leisel Carter. I was born Leisel Meyer. I'm 86 years old and a survivor of the Holocaust. I have entitled my talk, Retracing My Steps and Completing the Journey, as it has taken me over 70 years to find out a small part of what happened in my past. I will talk about what happened to my family during my early years and how a lucky encounter changed my escape from a desperate hope to reality, how I made a life in England, and how it was many, many years before I had the confidence to try and retrace my steps. I will share how I traced some of the people who helped me to escape. Finally, I will talk about what I found out about my father. What makes a family and marks it out as special in either a good or a bad way? This is my family, nothing out of the ordinary, father, mother, brother, and me. The only possible point of early interest was that my brother was 15 years older than me. I was a twilight baby. My mother, Martha, was 45, and my father, David, was 55 when I was born. A minor point of gossip at the time, but nothing more. I was born in 1935 in Hildesheim, a town in the center of Germany, close to Hanover, east of Berlin, and far to the south of Hamburg. Up to November 2012, this is all the information I had about my family. My father owned a successful business. He was a master butcher and made kosher sausages and prepared meat in his factory, which he sold in our shop. The business employed several people and he was well respected. He had seen active service as an interpreter for Germany in World War I and was decorated. He was captured and interned in Wales. It was whilst waiting out his time to return to Germany that he developed a liking for England. My mother, like all middle-class ladies, ran the home, but also helped to run the business. We lived in a spacious apartment above the family shop, which spanned 2 floors and was attended to by servants. After Hitler came to power, various parts of our lives began to change. Laws in 1935 prevented the slaughter of meat in the kosher ritual and prevented my father, as a Jew, from employing non-Jews. This was just the first of many changes that ultimately resulted in the business having to close down. I have no idea what he did to earn money after this happened. My father wanted to leave Germany and come to England. However, my mother didn't want to go and leave the wider family. She was supposedly heard to say, "We're German, we belong here, nothing bad will happen." It was a common view that things would settle down, and so they stayed. In mid-March 1937, my father was viciously beaten up by members of the SA, a group that later developed into the Brown Shirts. 2 weeks later, on 3rd of April 1937, he died. I believed that his kidneys had been badly damaged in the assault. This was the reason for his death. I had a photograph of his grave, but nothing else. After his death, my mother worked as a housekeeper and domestic servant to make ends meet. Early in the summer of 1939, my brother disappeared. We'd been tipped off that the Gestapo was coming to take him, and he'd climbed out of a window and fled. He was missing for 2 weeks before my mother received word through the Red Cross that he was alive and in France. At this point, my mother applied to leave Germany. She was given a 24-hour exit visa, but told that she could not take me with her. I have no idea why this was. I was approaching my 4th birthday. At this time, Jewish homes were being taken and people were starting to be moved. She left me hoping that she could make arrangements in England for me to join her there. I spent time between family, friends, and part of the time in a children's home. My mother was working as a housekeeper to a wealthy family in Hull. On the day that war was declared, I'm told, she burst into tears and said to her employer, "I will never see my poor Leisel again." It is only with the benefit of hindsight that I have realised how lucky I was that my mother was where she was and made that comment. The Sissons family, who she worked for, had connections in Europe as well as at home. They contacted a friend in Holland who offered to work with the Red Cross to take me in and to try to get me out to travel to England. However, I was not granted permission to leave, so this attempt was failed. A good friend of the Sissons' daughter heard of the story and wrote to her sister, who lived in Bergen, Norway. Because I had not been granted permission to leave the country on a normal visa, an application to allow me to leave on a Nansen passport was made. Originally set up in 1922 by Friedrich Nansen, these were developed for refugees from the Russian Civil War who became stateless when Lenin revoked their citizenship. These passports allowed stateless people to emigrate to a country that would have them, and the initiative received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1938. In my case, this was successful. My German nationality was revoked and I was stateless. This was the only way that I could leave Germany. In December 1939, I finally was ready to go. My release papers from the German Immigration Bureau gave my details, including adding Sarah to indicate my Jewish status. The notes at the bottom of the papers stated that I had no outstanding taxes, charges, fines, fees, or other costs. It continued to say that the Jew duty, that's JEW, would not be raised, that there were no objections to my transportation abroad. The permit was valid until 31st of December 1939. In early December, I left my home. I have little memory of my journey, but I am told that I was put on trains to travel across Europe. How this happened during wartime, I have no idea. Sometimes I was put in the care of the train guard. Other times I was escorted or left in the care of any stranger traveling on the same train. Sometimes I was kept overnight and then put on my next train. My exact route is not known. Believed it to be shown more or less on the map. I believe that the Nansen organization provided me with clothes, and I wore a sign around my neck that said, "My name is Leisel Carter and I'm traveling to England." I arrived in Bergen in Norway on Christmas Eve and stayed with the Alfsons family for about 3 weeks. My only memories of this time were sledging with 2 boys, going to the theatre, and a doll pram. Sometime in January 1940, I was put on a ship, the Jupiter, travelling to Newcastle, and so to complete my journey to safety. When I arrived in England, I was placed with various foster homes before I was ultimately placed with a Jewish couple in Leeds. I was unable to live with my mother because she worked as a live-in housekeeper, but I visited her when I could. I went to school in Leeds, so I was only 7 years before I could really speak English properly, which significantly affected my education. During the war, I was not allowed to visit the seaside because I was a foreign alien who might be a German spy and report on sea defences. I made friends at school and grew up. When my mother visited, she would collect me from school, but because she was so much older than the other mums and always wore black clothing, I told my friends at school that she was my grandma. My mother had reports of my brother through the Red Cross during the war, so she knew he was alive. I did not see him again until 1944. He visited my mother in England after Paris had been liberated. We found out that he had fought for the Free French in Africa and then with the Americans as they fought their way to liberate Germany in the final stages of the war. He did not return to our town in Germany and made a career for himself as a chef. He worked all over the world before settling in America. I saw very little of him and we became estranged after I married because he did not approve of my marrying a non-Jewish person. He married 3 times but never had any children of his own. He died in June 2013. I left school at 15 and went to Secretarial College. I met a nice Englishman in 1954 when I was just 19. He was called Terry and we got engaged within 3 months. This caused a lot of problems across both families because he was not Jewish, but we were determined to be together and finally got married in 1958. We had 3 children and were happily married for almost 48 years before I was widowed in 2006. My mother remarried in 1944 and went to live in London. My stepfather was also a refugee with older daughters. He did not want me to move in, so I stayed with my foster parents until I married. I did not have a close relationship with my stepfather, and he was not very pleasant. Although I visited my mother often, She did not talk about our life in Germany. I feel that she was so traumatized by what had happened that she would not speak about it. Whilst I respected this, it meant that I had a large hole in my family history. The only thing I knew was that my mother, brother, and I escaped along with an aunt, uncle, and one cousin. Everyone else was gone. My search to find out more of my history really began after my mother died suddenly in the autumn of 1963. In her things, I found 2 letters from Norway. I knew about the Alsons from my mother, but didn't fully understand what had happened to get me out. I wrote to the Norwegian authorities in the hope of tracing them and received a reply. As the German army had occupied Norway and had destroyed virtually all their records during the war, they were unable to help other than confirm that the Alsons no longer lived in that address. Given that this was the age before the internet, I gave up all hope of ever finding out anything else. So I concentrated on raising my family and putting the past behind me. In 1980, I was working at the University of Leeds as secretary to a professor who had a keen interest in Scandinavian countries. He was fluent in Norwegian and had connections in Norway. One day I was in his office and saw a photograph of Bergen Harbour on his wall. I'd been there, I said. He asked me if I'd had a nice holiday, and I told him that I couldn't remember being there because I was only 4 years of age at the time. I told him my story and how I had tried to find the Alsons. My prof asked to see the letters and said he would try and trace them for me. I made him promise that he would take good care of the letters. 2 weeks later, he called me into his office. I thought it was to dictate a letter, but he told me to sit down and put down my pen. He then gave me a piece of paper and said, "Here is their address. They now live in a very nice part of Oslo. He is 75 and she is going to celebrate her 70th birthday in March. This is a very special birthday in the Scandinavian countries. Also, here is their telephone number. Now it's up to you." I went back to my office and sat down and wrote one of the most difficult and important letters of my life. I didn't even know if they would remember me. I explained who I was and of my memories of them, namely a doll and pram, going sledging with 2 boys and going to the theatre. I did not know if these were dreams or real memories. One day later, I received a letter with a Norwegian stamp on it. It was from the Alsons. He said that they remembered me and had talked about me over the years. He said that when I arrived, I had a terrible cold and they wrapped me up in a blanket and sat with me by the fire. I talked about my Swedish mutti. I had no memory of her. They said I'd taken me to a pantomime, but it was all in Norwegian. Afterward, I told them what the play had been about, and as I only spoke German, they said that they thought I was a very clever child. Finn was my interpreter. They'd given me a doll and pram as a present for Christmas and a white fur coat with a hand muff. I was so attached to the doll and pram that I would not let them pack it for me, and it went on the boat when I did. They told me I was left in the care of a missionary. They finished by asking when I would visit. My husband was always very supportive, and in 1982, he made me go, even though we couldn't really afford it. I spent 4 wonderful days with Finn and Eileen in their home in Oslo. I was reunited with my sledging companions, Per and Jan, and also with their, who also had families of their own. This was the first part of finding out about how I came to England and how difficult it had been. They said that they had wanted to keep me with them in Norway, but decided that I should go to England where I would be safer. This proved to be a good decision because Norway was invaded by the German army in April 1940, so my future would have been precarious had I stayed. I came in contact with them both until early 1990s, when sadly Eileen passed away and Finn had to go into a home. He also passed away very shortly afterwards. After making contact with the Alsons in the 1980s, I discussed my earlier life with my only cousin, Judy. She gave me some information and told me that my father was the first victim of the Holocaust in Hildesheim. She thought it was because of him being beaten and dying, but had no more information. She thought he had been buried in Hanover. A photograph of the grave was all that I possessed. No address, no details at all. I wrote a couple of times to the German authorities, but could not find out anything. I thought that my story would end at that point. I often talked about finding my father's grave to my late husband, and he always said that we would find it one day. After he had died, I talked to my family about going to Germany to find the grave. In 2011, we decided to make a last-ditch attempt to find him. Now that the internet was available, there was lots of more information that could help us. With help from the Holocaust Survivors Friendship Group, I was put in contact with the Mayor's office in Hildesheim. They had information about my father and gave me the address of where he was buried and invited me to a commemoration service to be held on 9th of November 2012. This date was the anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. On that date in 1938, brown shirts and thugs rang amok all over Germany, smashing the windows of Jewish businesses, burning synagogues and houses down. Many people were beaten and there were deaths. Members of my own family had been taken away on this night and imprisoned in concentration camps for weeks at a time. Each year on the anniversary, the town holds a commemoration event on the site of the former synagogue. I was asked to make a speech there. I arrived in Hildesheim with my 2 daughters and my 2 granddaughters. We were given a tour of the town. It had been rebuilt as it was when I was a child. 80% of the town was destroyed by bombs during the war. There was clear sign that the Jewish history and events that took place there have not been hidden away. I met with the mayor, who gave me the cemetery details and information about my father. This was a complete bombshell for me. I was told that my father had been attacked in the street by the SA thugs, as I had always known. We believed that he fought back. He ran into the bank and the bank manager sheltered him. It was suggested that as he was a Jew, they might be waiting for him outside, that he leave by the back door. He is supposedly recorded as saying, I've been a good customer of this bank for many years. I'm German and I will leave by the front door. He left. The thugs were waiting and the beating continued. He finally fought his way out and went home. 3 days later, he was summoned to a basement hearing at the local Gestapo office and charged with causing an affray. He disappeared and nobody knew where he was. 2 weeks later, the family finally found out that he had been taken to Buchenwald camp. He never returned. What had happened? Nobody really knows. Speculation is that he refused to sign a confession and was either beaten to death or regularly beaten until he ultimately died. The injustice was that he was cremated and my mother had to pay to repatriate his ashes for burial. This is why he is the first victim of the Holocaust. His exact date of death is not known. The Hebrew wording on the gravestone has been translated, and it says, "This man David, son of Isaac, died on the last day of Pesach and the Jewish year." The date is different to that shown in English on the stone, which was the date that my mother received his ashes back for burial. Still reeling from this news, we were then taken to the cemetery. We found the grave easily. It is cleaned and well maintained and in good condition. It's in a shady part of the cemetery with trees close by. I brought stones from our mother's grave in London and left them there. I also said Yizka, a remembrance prayer, and we lit a yahrzeit candle for remembrance. Leaving a stone leaves a clear marker that a Jewish person had visited the grave. Whilst in the cemetery, we had been asked to meet with a local high school group called Bet Shalom. These students are not Jewish, but visit the cemetery every Wednesday and tend the graves. Local schools openly study the atrocities of the Holocaust in their history lessons as a lesson that it must never happen again. There is no hiding from history or responsibility here. We found a group of about 125 students waiting. Their annual commemoration told the story of my father and his death. The students were enthusiastic to me as I was a direct link to their history topic. The students are told of the Holocaust, and a prayer was said at my father's graveside in tribute to this first victim. I thanked them for their dedication in maintaining the cemetery. I'd been worried that my father had been left alone all these years, and it comforted me to know that he'd been visited every Wednesday. From the cemetery, we were taken to the ruins of the synagogue. This had been burnt down to the ground on Kristallnacht, with 60 people locked inside and the rabbi forced to watch from outside. The commemoration event was held here. I gave a speech about returning to Germany and my thoughts of coming back after so many years. About 200 people attended across all faiths. It was good to see a united approach, and there is no hiding or justifying past events. As I said at the start of my journey, it has taken me over 75 years to arrive at this point. What have I learned? I now know that my father was the first victim of the Holocaust in Hildesheim and what had happened to him. However, information is now raising more questions and the journey will go on. I've also concluded that in spite of bad things, that good can exist. My father and much of my family were killed in terrible circumstances. The deaths of my family are not unique, and we must always remember those who died and make sure that it never happens again. I say this not only for the Jewish people, but the gypsies, political prisoners, mentally and physically ill, and many more who were exterminated. For my part, before the war, there were roughly 250 people in my extended family. After the war, there were only 6 of us, and our lives were never the same again. Most of my family were not known to me because I was too young to remember them. I have no memory of the rest of my family and no real detail of what happened to most of them, other than that they were killed. However, here are a small number who I found information of. My Aunt Lucy was initially out of danger. She married a non-Jew, having eloped to Gretna Green. She was disowned by the family, but when she was widowed, she chose to return to Germany. She did not link up with the family and relocated to Hamburg. Her fate was to die in a camp. Had she stayed in Scotland, her future would have been much different. My 2 uncles, Julius and Georg, had very different outcomes to their plight. Both were arrested on Kristallnacht and sent to Buchenwald. Julius was released after 3 weeks and Georg after 4 weeks. Julius was given permission to buy a one-way ticket to Shanghai. His family weren't permitted to go with him, just like my mother with me. Also, he had to sign a promise that he would leave Germany by the end of February 1939 and never return. Uncle Julius left for Shanghai, leaving family behind. It was to go and live or stay and die. They had to sell their apartment and belongings to raise the money for the journey, to pay due taxes and duties. Sorry. My cousin and Aunt Ilse waited 18 months before they were allowed to join him. They finally left Germany in October 1940 and travelled via Moscow before taking the Trans-Siberian Railway. The journey took 16 days to complete. They were reunited with Uncle Julius and interred in a camp for 6.5 years. After liberation, they moved about before settling in America. They were the only members of my wider family who survived. Poor Uncle Georg and Aunt Minna couldn't get out and were transported to Riga concentration camp in January 1941. I don't know if the time in Buchenwald was a factor, but he must have felt that he couldn't go into another camp. He killed himself on the train. I have no idea how this affected Aunt Minna or if she even knew. She was eventually moved from Riga and was killed in Auschwitz at a later date. My cousin Ruth was Judith's sister. She was married and stayed to be with her husband and children. They had applied to go to America and this had been refused. She was 7 months pregnant when they were sent to Theresienstadt with her 2 children aged 4 and 2. A boy, who I much later found out was named Gideon, was born on the 13th of September 1942 in the camp. He never knew life outside a camp. Ruth's husband was transported in September 1944, but nobody knows to where. Ruth was sent with 3 children in October 1944 to Auschwitz. There, they were processed on arrival and went straight to the gas chambers. What I truly believe is that I survived as a result of the kindness of people that I did not know. This began with the official who warned my mother that the Gestapo was coming for my brother to give him time to escape. Later, my mother's employer in England and the Alphans in Norway helped to get me out of Germany. I cannot forget all the people who collected me from one train and put me onto the next as part of my journey to England. These people did not know me, did not receive any payment, and took risks to help me. I wanted to thank them, but can't remember them all as I was so young. My life has been happy and full of lasting memories. I have maintained a positive outlook in spite of my troubled beginnings. I was married almost 48 years to a wonderful man, and the fact that he was not Jewish never caused an issue. He supported me and helped me to keep and understand my important memories as a witness to this dark part of Europe's history. As for the story, it goes on. We are now making inquiries with the Buchenwald archive to find out more information about my father and how he died. The mayor of Hildesheim is arranging for a Stolpenstein to be put on the pavement outside where my father's shop was, and Bet Shalom are lobbying for a street in the town to be renamed after my father. I think this would be a fitting tribute to a remarkable man. As for me, I'm growing my own family. I have 3 children. I'm now a proud grandma to 5 and a great grandma to 4. thank you for listening.
Well, Leisel, it's very difficult to know how to begin to thank you for sharing your life story. As always, it was profoundly moving, as well as fascinating and interesting. And of course, some of the things you described were also disturbing for us. I think there is a short amount of time available if you're willing, Leisel, to answer any questions that may have arisen for people. So if you want to ask a question, if you could please unmute yourself and make yourself known, and we probably have time for 2 or 3 questions.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi. I wonder if I could ask, when you were talking about the little girl that was a friend at school, and then the next time she saw you, she walked at the other side of the road. Do you think that attitudes changed gradually over time towards Jewish people in the local area that you lived in? Or was it a more sudden change as it got closer to, the start of the war?
Because I didn't go to school in Germany, that's very hard for me to answer.
Oh.
I didn't go to school until I came to England. So I'm sorry, I can't give you any answer to that question.
Thank you for your question, Linda.
Okay.
Are there any other questions, please?
Hello, it's John Rees again from the college.
Hello, yes.
Well, thank you, first of all. And there's a long list of thank yous in the chat. So I know people have been very moved by hearing your story. Perhaps just in relation to that, your experience of coming to school and learning English as a refugee.
Yes.
What do you remember about the reception you got and the reaction from English children and families when you arrived?
Once or twice people say something about me being German, and I would always say I'm not German, I'm Austrian. Little did I know that the Austrians were as bad as, if not worse, than the Germans. So no, on the whole, I had a very, very happy childhood. And I had made lots of friends here in Leeds as I was growing up. So no, I had 1 or 2 very bad experiences. Having lived in Hull at the beginning of the war, we were always told when there was an air raid to get under the table. And when I came to Leeds, there was an air raid and they were looking for me. And where was I? Under the table. But on the whole, no, I didn't have a bad childhood. I had a very happy childhood.
Can I ask a question, please? It's Zora.
Yes.
Gosh, I was lost for words listening to your story, and thank you for sharing it. But it's really sad that in some ways the world hasn't changed. We still have refugees arriving in our country seeking a better life. What advice would you give to some of those people that are arriving at our shores today?
Try and mediate with them if they make derogatory remarks about your country or your religion or your colour or anything, and just say, can't you think of anything nice to say to me? I'm not picking fault with you, don't pick fault with me. I'm an accident of birth. I didn't choose to be born whatever. So just be a friend and just be tolerant. You have to be tolerant.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yes. And try and find the good out of people.
Thank you, Zora, for your question. I think there's time for one more if anybody has something burning.
Right. No.
You've always been very optimistic.
Sorry.
Well, Leisel, sorry, Tahira.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, how do you remain so positive throughout your life?
You have to be. You've got to be tolerant of other people and religions and colours and everything. And what is the point of carrying a chip on your shoulder? There's no point. Make your life, be happy, and try and make other people happy when you're with them as well.
You're a great role model.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Leisel, on behalf of all of us here this
Excuse
evening.
me.
Yes?
And when I came to England, when I went to school, they always spelled it L-E-I, but after my mother died, I found my original birth certificate and it's L-I-E, L-I-E-S-E-L.
Okay.
I think the English equivalent is Elizabeth. So, yes, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone who's here this evening for being with us and for sharing your incredible story and the hope that it brings us and reminds us of the importance of welcoming strangers into our community and recognizing their humanity. And I'm sure here in Calderdale, we're a borough of sanctuary, and I know that we have people who've arrived only a few weeks ago who've crossed the English Channel with families and young children. And your story inspires us and encourages us to ensure that we take very good care of them and that we do our utmost to help them in any way that we can. So on behalf of all of us, Leisel, thank you so much, and we wish you good health in the years ahead. I'm going to turn now to two of the student governors at the college, Cllr and Shawana, who I think are going to recite a poem for us one day by Christine Georgina Rossetti. So over to you now, Cllr and Shawana.
Thank you, Reverend Canon Barber, and thank you to Councillor Pillai and John Rees for their speeches, and Leisel Carter for her testimony. My name is Ikrazada. I'm one of the student governors at Calderdale College, studying on the T-level health technical course, level 3, and specialising in adult nursing. This evening's event has shown the impact of the Holocaust and other genocides have on each person, and we must learn from these tragic events to become better people and more united world. Miss Carter's story shows us that through all the tragedy, through all the darkness and evil, we can still find joy, happiness, and love in all our lives. If a person who has been through so much can do this, then we, many of us who have been born into peaceful times, can do our part to bring joy, love, and understanding to the world too. I will now recite a poem titled One Day by Christina Georgina Rossetti. I will tell you when they meet, in the limpid days of spring. Elder boughs were budding yet, oaken boughs looked wintry still, but primrose and veined violet in the mossful turf were set, while meeting birds made haste to sing, and build with right goodwill. I will tell you when they parted, with plenteous autumn sheaves were brown, when they parted heavy-hearted, the The full rejoicing sun looked down, as grand as in the days before. Only they had lost a crown. Only to them those days of yore could come back nevermore. When shall they meet? I cannot tell, indeed, when they shall meet again, except some day in paradise. For this they wait. One waits in pain. Beyond the sea of death love lies. Forever, yesterday, today, angels shall ask them, is it well? And they shall answer, yea. That was a poem One Day by Christina Georgina Rossetti. It talks about one day when those we love are taken from us. One day when everything changes. We need to remember that it takes one day for everything to change. We should also remember that by taking it one day at a time, working together, communicating, sharing, and loving, we can move forward as one people in peace. Thank you. I will now pass back to Reverend Canon Hilary Barber to continue this evening's event.
Thank you very much, Cllr, for sharing the poem with us. For those of you who've attended this event, certainly like myself, for the last 14 years, one of the most moving and parts of this event, certainly that I personally have always looked forward to, was hearing the morning song, the El Malai Rachamim, being sung by our Jewish friend Rudy Lever. Rudy Lever, for those of you who don't know, was the cantor and the chair of the synagogue at Bradford for the Reformed Jewish community. He died very sadly last year of COVID, well into his 90s. He just published his memoirs called Berlin to Bradford, which he published weeks before he died. I had the great pleasure of writing a foreword for his book, and I just read a very short paragraph that I wrote for Rudy before we hear his morning song. It might seem strange to have a Christian vicar write something for a faithful Jew, but for those of you who know Rudy, it won't come as a great surprise. Rudy has a wide and generous heart, committed to human flourishing in many different forms, breaking down misunderstanding and division, and seeking unity and harmony for the whole of humanity. Rudy is a faithful and practicing Jew who not only leaves his mark on the Bradford Synagogue, but on all the faith communities of West Yorkshire, where he lived and served the wider community. His singing on Remembrance Sunday and Holocaust Memorial Day for many lives on in our hearts and minds, reminding us of Rudy and the story of Judaism, and of St. Augustine, who says, "He who sings prays twice." Rudy's story is one to be shared and celebrated.
Il male rachamim shochin bam ramim hametzimenu chanachona hametzimenu chanachona tachat kanfi Shechina b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tohurim kezohar ha'matzirim lenishmot kol ele she'izkarnu hayom 6 million beterezin Buchenwald, Treblinka, Dachau, Sachsenhausen, Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz. Evi, Dan, Edith, Bertha, Yitzhak Affenkraut, Shehalechu Leolamam, Anna Bal Harachamim, Hasti Rehem Besete, Kenafecha, Leolamim. Utzeror bezroh hachayim et nishmatehem, Adonai hu nachalatam, ve'anuchu b'shalom al mishkatehem. V'nomar, v'nomar,
We're now going to say together, as we come towards the end of this event, the universal prayer for peace. If you feel able to join in the words, then please do unmute yourselves, and we're going to join in the words together. Lead me from death
to life,
from
falsehood to truth.
Lead
me
from
despair to hope,
from
fear
to
to trust.
Lead
Me
me
from hate to love,
from
war
to
peace.
Let
Peace fill our heart,
our
our world,
our
our universe.
So as this Holocaust memorial event in 2022 comes to a close, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance, and particularly those who participated. To Hannah, to the Mayor, to John Rees, to Leisel Carter, to Cllr, and of course to Rudy. And thanks at the very end to both Paul Waterworth and Sale Suleiman. On behalf of us all, thank you very much for your attendance. Go well, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.